So, welcome to this class on neuroscience of human movement. This is part 13 of our discussion on primary motor cortex. So, in this class we will discuss the crucial nature of how fingers and hands are supplied from the primary motor cortex, or they receive monosynaptic projections from M1. So, a crucial aspect of motor control has this feature where fingers and hands receive monosynaptic projection from M1, whereas other parts of the body, especially the legs for example, and the more proximal parts of the body such as shoulder for example, do not receive these monosynaptic projections. So, what is the importance of this monosynaptic projections? We have discussed this in several previous classes. So, I will once again briefly introduce this and touch upon its importance today. So, movement of hand and fingers are directly controlled by the motor cortex. So, that means by studying the movements of hand and fingers, you could get a clearer picture when compared with other parts of the body about the strategies that are employed by the movement control system. When compared with other parts, the picture is going to be more clear or less muddled when compared with the other parts or more proximal parts. So, the distal most parts of the upper limb, the hand and fingers, are very special in humans. They are very special, which is also the reason why we study finger function at our lab at IIT Madras. So, we have the neuromechanics lab at IIT Madras. So, in our lab we study hand and finger function. So, why? Because we believe that the hand and fingers serve as the model system for studying the human movement control system. So, by studying the hand and fingers, we could come to a more general conclusion about the functions of the motor control system, in particular the motor cortex and stuff. So, the strategies that are used are clearer from the studies of finger function, which is the reason why we study finger mechanics at the neuromechanics lab at IIT Madras. So, we will discuss some of our own work in today's class. So, let us remind ourselves of the situation. So, the case is that the control of the hand and fingers. So, this muscle for example is controlled by the alpha motor neuron here. So, that is the alpha motor neuron. So, this alpha motor neuron is receiving inputs from the motor neurons in the cortex. These motor neurons are called as upper motor neurons, we just discussed in one of the previous classes, or it is called as corticomotor neurons, right. So, these corticomotor neurons receive these corticomotor neurons send commands directly to alpha motor neurons, and these alpha motor neurons innervate muscles that control the distal parts of the upper limb or the hand and the fingers. This is the reason why the control is expected to be clearer, the strategy is expected to be clearer. A question is, how are the other muscles in the body controlled? There are several hundreds of muscles in the body. How are the others controlled? Well, let us suppose a different case. Let us take a different case. So, here is another neuron. It is going to project to a different segment in the spinal cord, and there is another neuron there probably that is going to project to a different segment in the spinal cord, maybe or maybe not, it may be in the same segment also, and then that is going to project horizontally to an alpha motor neuron, and that is going to control a more proximal part of the body. More proximal parts of the body means what? So, proximal part of the body refers to that part of the body that is closer to the center, is it not? So, when the fingers are farther away from the center of the body when compared with say the wrist, when compared with say the elbow and the shoulder. So, a particular joint can be simultaneously proximal or distal with reference to different joints. Let us consider the case of elbow joint. The elbow joint is proximal, is closer to the center of the body when you look at it from the wrist point of view, or in other words, proximal to the wrist is the elbow joint, whereas when considered from the shoulder joint's point of view, it is distal, it is farther away from the center of the body. So, but from the point of view of fingers, there is no point that is distal from the tip of the finger, that is the distal most point, right. So, when I say the more proximal parts of the body are controlled by several interneurons, these are interneurons. This is another interneuron. This is an alpha motor neuron. We know what is an alpha motor neuron. Alpha motor neuron is this motor neuron that controls the muscle function, that innervates several muscle fibers, and the alpha motor neuron and all the muscle fibers innervated by it are all together called as a motor unit. We have studied this in one of the previous classes. So, when I say proximal, we are talking about, for example, shoulder joint, for example, other parts of the body. Also, the distal most point of the leg are also controlled through interneurons. So, it is not a case of what is distal or what is proximal. In other words, the distal most points of the upper limb are controlled by the monosynaptic projections, whereas the toes, for example, the toes of the leg are not controlled by the monosynaptic projections from corticomotor neurons. There are interneurons when it comes to leg control, which is also the reason why our legs are, or the toes of the leg are not so dexterous. You cannot pick up objects and manipulate objects with the leg, whereas you can do that with the hand, right. So, this means the hand and fingers are very special to the extent that only these receive these direct projections from the corticomotor neurons, or direct monosynaptic projections from the corticomotor neurons. There must be very good reason why, very good reason, and this is more pronounced in humans. The number of such neurons that receive, the number of such alpha motor neurons that receive such monosynaptic projections from corticomotor neurons is higher, much higher in humans when compared with other species. So, this is the reason why our hand and fingers are so dexterous. We are able to manipulate tools and objects with ease when compared with other animals, right. Also to note is that this not only is the number higher. So, one is that the number of neurons that receive this is higher. Why is this higher? We discussed in one of the previous classes why this is required in humans, but this is present in humans but not in other animals. Humans are special in that they are proper bipeds, right. So, their hands are free, they do not have to use hands for walking, hands for locomotion, or the upper limbs or the forelimbs are not used for locomotion when compared with other animals. So, that means there is a reason, and this gave them evolutionary advantage as to when you are able to stand up in a grassland and see an approaching predator, for example, right. So, you have distinct advantage of escaping from the predator, but when you are on all fours, when all your four limbs are on the ground, what are the odds that you are going to be able to escape an approaching predator who is going to be able to run faster than you? Lower, comparatively lower, right. So, evolutionary advantage of having bipedalism or standing up is first step. Then this led to the freeing of the hand, right. So, then came the regime of tool use, and further to tool use. So, when you want to use tools, fine control is needed. This probably necessitated the requirement of direct corticomotor neuronal monosynaptic corticomotor projections to alpha motor neurons. These are hypotheses. These are the various hypotheses that are prevalent about as to why this is the case. At least we now know that this is the case, and this is now well known and accepted, that the hand and fingers receive direct corticomotor neuronal projections to alpha motor neurons controlling their muscles. Okay. Not seen in other animals, not seen in other parts of the body within humans. So, very special mention for the hand and fingers. So, unlike pattern generating functions of the spinal circuits, what do we mean by that? So, what is mentioned here is that for example, in lower animals and presumably hypothetically in humans also, that is a matter of debate. At least in lower animals, it is now well known and accepted that there are these central pattern generators or the spinal pattern generators that are responsible for locomotor function. These produce oscillator like movements, oscillator like function, that are oscillator like activity that produces locomotor like function. That is present, that is prevalent in the spinal cord, the spinal circuits, whereas the hand and fingers, their control is from the primary motor cortex. So, very unique feature in humans this, and of course, let us not get into the controversy of the presence of spinal pattern generators in humans, that is a different topic. So, where do we stand? What is our own work here? So, in neuromechanics lab at IIT Madras, which is my lab, we study finger and hand function. Now, also the reason as to why we study finger and hand function, we are interested in understanding the brain strategies in movement control, and we believe that hand and fingers and mechanics of hand and finger function can give us information about how the movement control system functions, or in other words, we consider the hand and fingers as the model system for studying human movements. So, here are some examples that I would like to show. We have these ATI nano sensors that measure fingertip forces in all three directions. So, the small forces and moments, and the small moments that are produced by the fingers while manipulating objects. And we also have these electromagnetic tracking sensors. So, these from polymers, these can track movements of individual finger segments, linear and angular displacement. So, each of these are 6 component sensors, both of these, one is a 6 component 4 stalk sensor, the other one is a 6 component kinematic sensor. So, the polymers one measures linear and angular displacements in all 3 directions. So, that we can do for each individual finger segments. We have also built our own instrumentation for studying hand and finger function. For example, in one of our studies that is funded by DST's Cognitive Science Research Initiative, we asked the question, how do people learn to perform sequential movements or learn a motor sequence, and how do people become an expert at this? For this purpose, we developed an instrumented glove. I am showing the glove here. So, each of the segment, if you touch, for example, if you touch, so this glove is worn with the on the hand, and when different parts of the different fingers are touched, for example, the distal most segment of the index finger, if it is touched, a particular alphabet is going to be typed on the screen. And we have several such alphabets, and people learn to type this using practice over several days. Now, the question that we ask is, how does expertise evolve? So, it is well known, of course, the general studies that are done in this sort of domain, in this domain, is to compare experts with novices. Obviously, the performance of the experts will be much different from the performance of the novices. So, when you take for example, this is true in any sport or any art or any particular motor function. Somebody who has been practicing for a long time, I take their action, and somebody who has not at all been practiced, a naive new entrant to the field, I ask them to perform, and then I say these two are different. That is obvious, everybody knows that, we all appreciate that, novices and their movements are going to be different from experts and their movements. In this project that is funded by DST's Cognizance Initiative, we ask the question, how is this motor skill acquired? What is the evolution of the expertise? A person becomes an expert, but we will study the temporal evolution of expertise. What are the various stages that you cross when you become an expert? And then after that, suppose I disturb your expertise, where you have to unlearn and relearn something. Suppose earlier in this glove, when you touch the index finger's distal most segment or the tip of the index finger, say A is typed, after you learn I am saying Q will get typed, for example. When that happens and I am asking you to type the same word as previously, now suddenly I have disturbed your learned association. So you will have to unlearn what has been previously learned and learn a new association. How is that getting affected? That is the other question that we asked, thanks to generous funding from Department of Science and Technology. So these are some of the things that we do. The other thing that we are doing is with the study of fingertip forces in object manipulation. Here I have a model of a handle or a handheld object. So I have these are dummy sensors, these are not real sensors. These are dummies of the actual sensors that are used. These are made of acrylic and stainless steel. The handle itself is made of acrylic. So, but the real system will have these ATI nanos. These ATI nanos are very expensive, so I cannot bring this to this place and show. So, when I press and hold this object, I produce a vector of force on this, right. So, basically it is going to be oriented in any given direction, any arbitrary direction, depending on the physics of the task or what I am trying to do with this object. If for example, I am trying to do that or that, for example, or that or any of this, or I am trying to rotate, I am trying to translate this, or a combination of this, I am performing a general plane motion or any of this. Suppose I know the physics of the task well, suppose I know the trajectory, I know all the physics, suppose. Then the question is, how does the fingers coordinate, or how does the finger system coordinate to produce this known physics? I know what to do and I am doing what I should be doing, but yet it is not clear how individual fingers coordinate to produce the desired outcome. So, precise control of the physics is required, and we do this all the time, we are able to do this. The question is, how are we doing this? That is the question that we ask in our lab and try to answer this. To that end, this object is a relatively well studied object, its mechanics has been relatively well understood. So, we are building objects whose mechanics are more complicated than obvious. So, those who are interested can visit our lab website to know more or write to me, I will be happy to explain. So, we produce objects whose mechanics are not obvious, are completely non-intuitive, and we ask people to adjust to such objects. How does the human system adjust to such perturbations is the question that we ask. Those who are interested can check it out. So, in summary, we say that there are monosynaptic projections from M1 to the hand and finger areas or hand and finger muscles, and movement of hand and fingers are directly controlled by the motor cortex, which is the reason we study finger function and hand function at Neuromechanics lab at IIT Madras. Thank you very much for your attention.